The smell of stale vodka and machine oil lingers in the air. A pale green light pierces your eyelids. Wake up. You're at the bottom of a trash heap somewhere in Cyberpoland, and your pierogies are all scrambled. You've got no idea how you ended up here to begin with, or even who you are.
These are the opening moments from a new indie game that's hard to name. Peripeteia.
Did you get it right on the first try? Peripeteia? Peripeteia? Peripeteia?
Peripeteia.
Pet Pteranodon. Since its announcement in 2020, we've only been able to chew on the few scraps and pieces that have fallen off the back of the truck. A teaser here, a demo there, but now the early access version has finally fallen off of the assembly line. That's how it works. Either it falls off the back of a truck or it falls off the assembly line.
That's how it works.
So, it's time to ask, was the game worth the wait? More precisely, is it any fun?
Before we begin, please be aware that footage comes from a pre-release build, so you're probably going to see some jank.
And if you didn't want to see any jank, what are you doing here?
Yeah, 50% of our channel is jank. And as always, if you want to support our never-ending crawl through a bunch of jank, we'll talk about some ways you can support our channel near the end of the video. But for now, let's juice up our map drones and begin scanning the twisting hallways and monolithic buildings of Peripeteia. My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Roland Kunz. And together, we are the two-headed hero. Peripeteia is the debut game from Ninth Exodus. While billing itself as a cyberpunk role-playing stealth game, it leans more towards the realm of immersive shooter. With its combination of open design, post-Soviet ruin, and anime influences, Peri promises to take us back to a time in the late 90s when immersive sims were at their height. A storied period of nostalgia that produced some of the most influential titles in history.
Oh my God, Daddy!
What a shame.
Anyways, after waking up in the dump, it's time to figure a way out. The nearby table has a cassette player and a tape labeled scrap log. Not much help there.
When I wake up, I go dump a scrap log.
The note next to the tape mumbles something about a non-standard unit that has night vision, a recon drone, and enhanced speed. Wait, that's you! You're the weird big-headed battle angel Alita-looking trenchcoat puppet. That's you! You're that!
Using your super legs, or good old-fashioned trial and error platforming, you manage to crawl up out of the garbage heap and come face to face with an old junker named Philemon.
Are you sure it's not Philemon?
Philemon, he's just as surprised as you are that you're, well, alive, and helps you pick through the few fragments of your memory still rattling around in your cyber skull. There ain't much. Your name is Marie, and you have a vague memory of coming to life in a bunker somewhere.
Philemon considers this for about 1 second and then offers to help you in exchange for a fabulous object, the projector bulb from a nearby planetarium. Then he just kind of hand waves you in the building's general direction before stumbling back to the bar, leaving you to ask yourself, well, what do I do now? But lack of direction is a key part of Peri's design. This isn't a bad thing. After years of yellow paint complaints and map marker overload, it's refreshing to see a game put exploration in the forefront without making it feel like checking items off of a grocery list. Other than the compass, the only things that help point your way through Peri's long hallways and dark superstructures are directions from NPCs. Any important details end up in Marie's handy journal, which kinda looks like the last used iPad at the pawn shop. But if you're not paying attention to the surroundings and dialogue, yeah, you're probably gonna get lost.
Detailed body control allows players to jump, crouch, lean, dash, and so on, but there's a couple important additions. A wall grab allows Mei to shimmy along just about any ledge like a big-headed anime Lara Croft. She can also jump in midair, often saving her from instant death during a heavy drop. The number of times she can do this is once. So if you mess up a jump, well, let's just say it's a good thing that there's a fully featured system that allows you to save scum at any time. Almost. More on that later.
Marie's body is fully modeled, from her massive doll head down to her steel-toed boots, and the game actually has a decent third-person camera. I love it when games do this. It really grounds the character in the world rather than making it feel like you're a camera with a gun stuck to it. First-person platforming is also a lot better when you can see your feet, and there's a lot of platforming to be done here in Cyberpoland.
Instead of just bumping into the ladder to climb it, like you would in pretty much any other game, you have to hammer the jump button a dozen times or so to ascend. Climbing down is the opposite. You have to tap the crouch button a bunch of times, or hold crouch to slide down and risk breaking your robo legs. This takes a little getting used to, and it's probably the result of some sort of programming workaround. I'm guessing Peri's ladders are just made up of a bunch of small grabbable ledges. I think we should also mention that the difference in climbing creates a little bit of textural difference in the experience. So it's not necessarily bad.
Not necessarily bad, but it is different.
Sometimes different is enough.
With these tools, it's possible to get nearly anywhere you can see within the game's massive concrete mazes. And these levels are absolutely huge. A single area has enough secrets and side quests to keep a player occupied for hours. But on the flip side, there's a lot of extremely long hallways and endless stairwells to navigate. This feels like an intentional choice by the level designers to instill this sense of foreboding and surreality during the game's quiet moments.
Marie and all the other characters move around pretty fast. Speedrunners caught on to this, and there's already footage of someone beating the entire demo mission in 100 seconds. Insane!
Whoa.
So, what's the solution? Make the level geometry bigger, right? I guess that makes sense, but now to compensate for the increased player speed, all the enemies have to move faster to keep up, or combat would be a total pushover.
All this makes for some slightly hacky game feel at times, as if Peri was a lost 2000 Slavjank title pulled fresh off a Ware's site and booted up on a PC that's just a little too modern for its arcane engine.
Most of the time, you'll want to stick to the shadows to avoid any unnecessary entanglements. Maui's face in the corner here indicates how visible she is, with her oversized eyeballs glowing in the dark when she's completely hidden. So basically, Maui's head is a light gem. Nice touch. Silenced guns and long-range headshots are helpful, although these are a bit of a guessing game when the suppressor is large enough to obscure your gun sight. Whether you're popping Mosin rounds into vague silhouettes, or chopping up unsuspecting backpackers with a rusty military saber, stealth is harder than it sounds. This is where the cyber implants come in handy.
Marie starts out with enhanced speed, which helps land those pesky jumps, a small mapping drone that allows her to peek around corners, and most importantly, a night vision mode. These all run off of an internal battery that has to be recharged with power cells. More implants can be found and purchased from various vendors and NPCs tucked away in the levels, ranging from reflex boosters to ablative armor to a mind-controlling puppeteer mod that lets you start some beautiful infighting. Gotta love that infighting.
Gotta. Our multi-talented metalhead also has a talent for hacking, and Peri might have one of the most fun implementations of a hacking system in any game. When you sit down at a terminal, you have to quickly start mashing all the keys on your keyboard until parts of the password are revealed, and if you're clever, you can fill in the blanks before the timer runs out. It's such a unique idea that really drives home the Hollywood hacker stereotype, and I'm surprised I've never seen it as a hacking minigame before. Too bad there isn't more utility for this fun little mechanic outside of being your glorified lockpick. What if we could take control of turrets or drive some tanks around, or even hack in objective markers onto your HUD or something? Feels like a missed opportunity, but you know, we're not gonna talk about the game that's not here.
When your best laid plans inevitably fail and the only way around is through, well, you gotta go loud. Firefights in Peri are quick, hectic, and lethal. Your aim is affected by body physics, which means that sighting down a weapon has a sort of frantic, weighty momentum, especially if you try to use it in the middle of a close-range gunfight. Stealthy corner peeking and precise headshots are clutch for your success. If I had to compare, it lands somewhere between the brutal jank of Cruelty Squad and a sweaty tactical shooter like Escape from Tarkov or something.
Pull your eyeball away from that gun sight, though, and bam! Peri changes into a boomer shooter. Mary can do some crazy Ghost in the Shell moves, flipping and dodging out of the way of incoming fire while outmaneuvering various trench-coated thugs and gas mask goons in bullet time. It's hard to deny the satisfaction of taking down a T-55 tank with an old Russian hunting shotgun. If you've got good hops and decent aim, you can pull off some incredible things.
And you're gonna need to, because Maria is surprisingly fragile for a killer cyborg. Even though she can fall several stories without a scratch, taking a couple of bullets will crumple Marie like a discarded soda can. There's a detailed damage model here as well. Breaking a leg slows you down, taking head damage will scramble your vision, and so on. Although it's unclear if this model also applies to the enemies.
After surviving a rampage, it's time to survey the damage. Translation: dig through the pockets of all the dead guys. Right away you'll notice how much can be manipulated in Perry's vision of Cyberpoland. Drag bodies around, nudge some crates, toss back some vodka, and have yourself a squat in true Gopnik style. Perry's im-sim sensibilities often shine through here as you drag bodies in nearby shadows to avoid discovery, or toss glass bottles to distract a guard. Or toss glass bottles at a guard. You gotta wear a gas mask and a trench coat and a helmet if people keep tossing glass bottles at you all day long.
It's true, you never know what's inside those bottles. Ammunition is rare and expensive, so every round counts. Emptying leftover rounds from the guns of your victim is often the difference between life and death later on down the line. You'll need to breech load individual rounds into shotguns like the Spaz 12 or older rifles like the SKS. And if you want to reload that shiny AK in the middle of a sweaty battle, you better make sure to pack an extra magazine. That means actually finding an extra magazine for the gun, then packing the proper caliber ammunition into it. This amount of granularity, really cool.
There's a crazy selection of weapons in Perry's arsenal, at least 24. Most of these are based on real-world Soviet and NATO firearms, with a few exotic prototypes sprinkled in. And if you want to try them all out, a hidden firing range in the apartment level lets you live your fantasy of taking cheap shots at Lenin's nose with all the fun toys.
Gear can be shuffled around in this grid inventory to maximize your loot yield, which feels a little more granular than normal. Maybe too granular. Guns and items are all these oddly shaped Tetris pieces, so you might end up fiddling around in your bag way more than you want to at first, until you realize that you can't keep any money or gear after completing a mission.
I think that is really interesting, and we should talk about it for a second. The Tetraminos more accurately model the shape of the thing and just kind of ignore the weight. Then all of a sudden, I'm modeling how it must feel to be a super strong robot. It's more about physically fitting all of these things onto us than it is, can I carry the things? That makes sense, and it's interesting. There's a different texture to it. However, you're actually putting a lot of detail and a lot of focus on moving things around in your inventory. And if you don't get to keep the way that your inventory is arranged, why did you put so much focus there?
You have the same net result as if you had extra negative space around all those objects, because nothing fits there, so it's not useful to have those extra 1 or 2 block regions, really. The excitement of finding a shiny new toy gets crushed pretty quickly when you realize you'll probably have to dump it on the ground a few rooms away to make room for a functioning weapon. Once I realized this, I started treating all the guns as disposable items, tossing them away once used up unless I desperately needed to save a few to buy up some health and batteries from one of the out-of-the-way merchants. I think that this is the way the game is supposed to be played. Emptying armloads of firearms into hordes of degenerates, tossing all my empty guns on the ground, corpse robbing anything useful, and then parkouring my way towards a new area to start the process all over again. But since there's no loot to hoard, no stats to build, no items to upgrade, or mechanics to unlock, Perry does lack a real sense of player progression. All we're left with is story progression.
Peripeteia is a literary term that refers to a sudden reversal of fortune. Hard to imagine a bigger change in luck than being slated for the scrap pile only to suddenly find out you're still alive. In this light, it seems fitting that Marie's resurrection in the scrapyard also becomes her path to self-discovery.
After climbing out of the trash and getting your handout from Junker Philemon, he briefly brings you up to speed on local politics. In an alternate post-Soviet future, a massive nuclear war demolished the USSR. Moscow lies in ashes, the air got poisoned, and weird things roamed the streets. Potato sack-wearing droids that dredged up bodies and whisked them away to some unknown location. After a couple decades had passed, a seed of civilization began to wind its way up through the broken concrete landscape.
Two main factions push for control over the region. The Second Socialist Republic, or SSR, retreated to the east and began rebuilding their power base from a network of underground bunkers. Their propaganda messages still pollute the airways, even though their influence in the area is limited to whatever conscripts they manage to shove out towards the west at the point of a bayonet.
The PSR, or Polish Solidarity Republic, is the remains of a religious regime that aims to return a semblance of normalcy to the region. They do their best to present themselves as a kind of police force. Unfortunately, most regular citizens don't share in their philosophy and would rather look to the future instead of dwelling on the past. Then there's a mess of smaller groups, like the subculturalists, joy cultists, or desperate homeless, that band together out of necessity and scratch out the means of survival on their own.
Philemon finally shoves you out the door after talking your ear off. And so, just like that, you set out to retrieve a glorified light bulb in order to trade it for a couple scraps of info and a much-needed train ticket. For this train! After hopping your way over a few buildings, you might stumble across this random gardener, Jacob, who lets it spill that Marie's not the first amnesiac wandering cyborg to come from Philemon's junkyard. Ooh. Apparently, custom skin jobs like yourself, that's a gross word, wander out of that scrap heap all the time before gathering up some guns and resources and heading off towards a mysterious bunker never to be seen again. You're just the latest in a long line to make this exodus.
Way to make a girl feel special, Jacob. The planetarium looms into view before long, and here you'll find several groups embroiled in their own Cold War over the territory. Marie finds herself at a crossroads of this little faction conflict, and there's more than a couple different ways to get that shiny train ticket into your little chrome thingies. A group of subculturalists have moved into the planetarium and refuse to let you in unless you agree to bomb the nearby PSR outpost. But the PSR want you to snitch on Philemon, and they'll buy your train ticket if you decide to rat out his plan to steal the projection bulb.
In the sewers, a machine gun preacher agrees to turn off the planetarium projector, which will allow the bulb to cool down enough to steal it, but only if you can return the control chip that keeps his cherished cryo chambers full of holy people alive. And at the bottom of the projection room itself, a broken robot implores you to leave the projector alone and drag their decayed form to their only trusted friend, a repairman by the name of Philemon.
This moral intersection is only the first one that Marie will need to navigate during her quest for identity. As you can see, a lot of the aforementioned paths require the player to climb every tower and investigate all the dark corners of massive maps, or risk missing an interesting detour. In a true callback to 90s design, the main storyline can feel disjointed if you miss out on character interactions, blow away vital quest NPCs, or boundary break certain plot outcomes. But then again, to its credit, Perry leaves these choices with the player instead of making them for you. It almost makes you want one of those old GameFAQs articles with the ancient ASCII character maps to help you navigate this thing.
Luckily, GameFAQs is alive and well.
And hopefully will be forever.
That's far from where the 90s design choices end. One of the developers, Shodanon, claims the Twitter handle @90sgraphics. And there's a big reason for this. We get grimy, overlarge cityscapes that feel never-ending, dark, cloudy skyboxes, near-constant rain effects, low-res textures applied to comparatively simple character models, shiny surfaces, glimmering pools of wastewater, late-night conversations with the weird neighbor in the hallway. The end result gives Perry an authentic early-aughts Slavjank vibe, a rundown cyber grime style full of crumbling concrete and rusted metal that makes the entire game feel like a product out of time. He's on fire! It's cool to see, but it's not all good news.
This game is dark. So dark that it's really hard to navigate sometimes without night vision turned on. The options menu has a reference for the brightness level. This should be black? Nah, I don't think so. I need to be able to see. A lot of footage you're watching here had to be artificially brightened in post. Boosting the brightness slider in-game also has the unfortunate side effect of adding a bloom supernova every time you look at a light source the wrong way. On the audio side, sound effects are largely satisfying, especially when Marie falls too far and breaks her legs. That's a good thing, since you'll probably be hearing this a lot. Guns got a lot of tender loving care when it comes to sound, of course, but we also get some creepy distorted chatter and radio static from the various guards and soldiers. But the real star of the show has to be the soundtrack. A ton of talented artists lent bumping techno tracks that range from tooth-grinding drum and bass bangers to moody trip-hop to mellow indie rock, and all of it was absolutely top-notch. But the combat tracks transcended time and space to put me firmly in my trench coat and Matrix sunglasses from 1999.
Peri is developed by Ninth Exodus, a small indie studio that's generated a decent amount of renown during the last 5 years of our real-world dystopia. During this time, the studio has done a lot to cultivate goodwill in the indie dev scene. They've built a thriving Discord community that spans many different languages and cultures. Multiplayer game nights, fan art channels, indie developer support groups, there's a little bit of everything here. It's a great place to lurk, and you know how I love to lurk, and it's clear that the users and testers have had a lot of influence in how the game has turned out.
Not to say Peri is designed by committee, far from it, since it's clear that the two main developers, Shodanon and Snaketicus, had a very specific vision in mind. But we mention this here because, well, it's really heartwarming to see grassroots communities spring up around a common goal. We hate to knock a group effort in any way, but unfortunately, this doesn't make a game immune to criticisms.
Even though the game has been cooking for 5 years, early access feels still pretty early. Loot bugs and inventory issues are somewhat common, with dropped guns often disappearing into the aether. Sometimes grenades just didn't work, or save files would bug out. This stuff comes with the territory of early access, of course, and likely will get ironed out in the coming months.
But my chief complaint occurs at the game's midway point. One particular mission strips Marie of her weapons and abilities and forces her to sneak through a long abandoned facility run by crazy robots. This level is just as expansive as the others, but there's one important difference. You can only save in a handful of designated areas. I really admire the attempt to change pace. There's some extremely cool world building and effective horror tones here, but in a game that otherwise encourages experimentation and the liberal use of the mighty Save Scum. It's really frustrating to get funneled down a set pathway and filtered by sparse checkpoints, insta-kill enemies, and ammo starvation. Ultimately, it ground my enjoyment to a halt, but the mission still has a lot of promise. Plus, there's a level select, so you could just skip it. But I'm really hoping this level gets a rebalance in the future so I can see the end of it.
Some players are going to love this game for its atmosphere, tactical encounters, and extreme player freedom. Others are going to loathe its disjointed storytelling and lack of meta progression. I can see this game turning into a cult hit later down the assembly line if the early access period manages to sand some of its jagged edges to finer points.
Peripeteia will probably be remembered as a divisive game, but it's uncompromisingly steadfast in its vision, and that alone is reason enough to experience it. As it stands, there's at least 20 hours of solid entertainment in this post-Soviet playground. And if you love this strange intersection of ambitious jank with sweaty combat as much as I do, you'll probably take a run through these crumbling cities once more when the game hits 1.0.
We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us on this jaunt through the soggy streets of Cyber Poland. If you know of any janky shooter/RPGs from the early 2000s that you think we should check out, let us know down in the comments below. And if you'd like to help support our future endeavors, consider supporting our Patreon and Ko-Fi. Just a couple of coins gets you early access to videos, frequent updates, exclusive content, and special Discord roles.
We honor the heroes at the Seat of Honor level, Wolfgang Bristol and John Mark Collado.
And we crack open the finest kvass for those gathered around the heroes table, including
Adam Uselman,
Jadusable,
KK,
Warpes,
Yaroslav Rybaki,
and the rest. Your donations make all the difference. But if you find your wallet a little light on the zlotny this month, you can still help us out by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and having uncomfortable conversations with us in the hallway of your apartment building late at night.
Yes. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next
Two-headed hero.